What is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Welcome to episode 63 of the Be Great podcast. On today's episode, we got hot seat talk. You know what I'm saying? We're going to talk about hot seat. All right. I got 10 coaches on the hot seat. Okay. I reached a little bit for a couple. Okay. Reached a little bit for a couple because I wanted to get a nice, even 10. But I got 10. I feel good about the 10. Some of them are obvious. Some of them you probably didn't think about. But here we go. I got at least one from each conference, so I am happy about. Wait, actually, do I? I lied. I got one from every conference except the Big 12. I don't have a coach from the Big 12 unless I'm blind right now. But let's get into it. This is in no particular order. Like the person I start with or end with, that isn't like the person I think is most on the hot seat. Although there are levels to the hot seat. But it's kind of just in a random order. Okay. First, I'm going to go with Kalen DeBoer. Let's start with Kalen DeBoer. Why is Kalen DeBoer on the hot seat after a 9-4 season, 5-3 in the SEC? That's not bad, right? Sure, it's not bad in isolation, but when you think about Alabama and you think about what they just had in Nick Saban, see, Alabama fans and their institution are, what's a good word to use? Delusional. I think that's a good word. And the reality is, Alabama, their fans, and the program itself, they do not accept good. You have to be great. You have to be elite. That's what they expect there. 9-4 is not that, especially with some bad losses in there. A loss to Vanderbilt where you let them score 40 points. A loss to Oklahoma where you got absolutely annihilated and couldn't even score a touchdown against a team who barely threw the ball. And then a loss in a bowl game to Michigan who could barely complete a forward pass. Okay? Like all those, like losing to Tennessee last year, that's fine. That's understandable. If Alabama had lost to Georgia, that's understandable, right? But a loss to Vanderbilt right after you beat Georgia, a blowout loss to Oklahoma, those are, and then a loss in the bowl game to Michigan, who you were far superior than, is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And Kalen DeBoer is going to be in another year here where he has to perform. I think Alabama has to make the playoffs. Do I think they'll fire DeBoer if they don't make the playoffs? Not necessarily, but I definitely think it's possible. It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Because look at the schedule. I mean, it can get ugly if Kalen DeBoer and this Alabama team are not careful. Okay? You should start off 3-0. Even though two of those games are Florida State and Wisconsin, Florida State has to prove that they are not terrible for me to even believe that they're competent again. And Wisconsin is quite frankly just not good. So you should start off 3-0. And then you have to go for the first time in Kirby Smart's time at Georgia, you have to go to Athens. And again, win or lose, I think if Alabama were to lose that game to Georgia, I don't think that's that big of a deal for Kalen DeBoer's hot seat. Okay, that's an understandable loss. And then you got the rematch game against Vanderbilt, but this time you get it at home. Although playing at Vanderbilt is basically a home game, but I digress. You have at Missouri, who is usually no slouch. Then you got Tennessee, and this is a Tennessee team that you better beat, especially being at home. You better beat them. Tennessee is not what they were last year. They are not a playoff team, not even close. And then, and this is the stretch right here that you have to really worry about. Like in the first half of the schedule, the really only concerning thing would be Georgia and then maybe Missouri. But these last these last 5 games, 4 of them can be dangerous for Kalen DeBoer and this team, for a team who was wildly inconsistent last season. And that 5-game stretch is at South Carolina, home against LSU, home against Oklahoma, then you got Eastern Illinois, which that's obviously a win, and then at Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Here's my issue. LSU, in my opinion, is a top 5 team in the country. You are not. South Carolina should have beaten you last year, but they didn't. They should have beaten you last year, and this time you got to go to South Carolina. That is a dangerous game, especially when it is sandwiched between Tennessee and LSU. And then the Oklahoma game. Oklahoma is going to be a better team than they were last year, and they trounced you last year. Now, granted, they got to come to you, but still, John Mateer is going to be one of the better quarterbacks you see all year, especially when it's back-to-back Garrett Nussmeier than John Mateer. Oh, by the way, even before that, you have to go back-to-back-to-back Lenora Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, John Mateer. That's not going to be fun. And Venable's defense seemed to figure out that Alabama offense last year. So we'll have to see if he's able to do it again. Eastern Illinois will be a win. But then you got Auburn, who's going to be a lot better than they were last year, in my opinion. So Kalen DeBoer has got to be careful, or he could see himself already fired. And then we move on to one that you probably maybe didn't expect to be on here, but I think it makes a lot of sense to be on here, and that's Bill Belichick at North Carolina. Will they give Bill Belichick more than one season? If you'd have asked me this question shortly after he was hired, of course. I think Bill Belichick will have all the time he wants. But now, when you look at the fact that it's been a headline-worthy offseason for all the wrong reasons with Bill Belichick and his, I don't know, is she his wife now, fiance, girl, whatever she is. They've been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. And it's become so much noise over there that I almost feel like if North Carolina, if Bill Belichick is not able to coach well in college because it's a lot different from the NFL, if he's not successful in his first season, because his North Carolina team, in my opinion, is not very good, I could see them just ridding themselves of him. I could see that. Do I think he'll get a second season? I do. Personally, I do. I wouldn't predict Bill Belichick to be fired unless maybe they went like 2-10, which I don't think will happen. But and the first game is massive. The first game, we got TCU versus North Carolina, and that's on. I think that's on a Monday. I think that's that like standalone game on a Monday, and that game is going to be massive. I think Bill and this North Carolina team, I think they need to win that game. Need to. Okay? Because if you win the TCU game, then you'll probably start off the season 4-0. You'll beat Charlotte, beat Richmond, and you should beat UCF. UCF's not a very good team. And then you got Clemson, which I don't expect you to beat Clemson. And again, that would be an understandable loss. But then you got Cal and Virginia back-to-back. They both are not good. You should win both of those. And then you're going to Syracuse 6-1. And that right there is already a really successful season for North Carolina. Because North Carolina does not have a hard schedule. I mean, they have Clemson, Syracuse, which I think will be 2 losses. But then the rest of their schedule is a bunch of meh. I mean, who's the third hardest team on their schedule? I mean, TCU probably. But like, as far as ACC opponent, you don't have to face Miami. You don't have to face SMU. I mean, you have to face Duke, who does have Darian Mensah at quarterback. But other than that, what really do they have? Are they really that big of a threat? Not really. NC State is not very good. Stanford's terrible. Wake Forest is terrible. Virginia is terrible. Cal lost a ton to the transfer portal. They aren't expected to be very good. UCF is one of the worst teams in the Big 12. I mean, and then not to mention Richmond and Charlotte. If Bill Belichick cannot win 7 games with this schedule, I mean, how could we expect any form of success? Realistically. So that's why I personally have Bill Belichick on the hot seat, and I stand by that, especially with all the offseason noise that we've heard. Not good offseason noise that we've heard. Third coach, Brian Kelly. I have stated this 1,000 times. I am very high on LSU. I think talent-wise, they're a top 5 team. I think they're a national title contender. I think they'll be in Atlanta in the SEC championship game. That is what I believe. But Brian Kelly, if he cannot, I'm just going to say this. If LSU does not make the playoffs, Brian Kelly should be fired. Fired. Okay? And look, even with how good LSU is, there are some understandable losses in the schedule. Okay? I think they really need to beat Clemson week 1. But if they were to lose to Clemson, I don't think it's the end of the world. Because Clemson is also, in my opinion, a top 5 team. I think that is a very hard game, especially being at Clemson. Okay? But then you got Florida in week 3. You better win that game. You better. You better not lose. Florida is better than they were last year, but they are nowhere near as talented as LSU, especially with it being at LSU. The Ole Miss game, I don't care that it's at Ole Miss. You better beat them. You're more talented than them. You're simply better than them. The South Carolina game, you're at home. You better win. You better not let Lenore Sellers beat you by himself. Okay? The Texas A&M game, again, you're better than them. At Alabama, I can understand if you lose. I can understand. But other than the at Alabama game and the at Clemson game, you better not lose another. You better not. You better not. And even Alabama, you're more talented than Alabama. You are more talented, period. You better not lose. But I can understand if you do. You better not lose to Arkansas or Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Florida, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt. If you lose to Vanderbilt, fire him the next day. I'm just saying. This team has to make the playoff. Has to. Has to, has to, has to. Period. You don't necessarily have to make the SEC championship game, even though I predict that they will. But you better make the playoffs. You better. That's all I'm going to say. Because I've talked about LSU 1,000 times this offseason. The next one is a popular one that's on the hot seat, and that's Hugh Freeze. Auburn has had, they've struggled. Last year was terrible. They were 2-6 in the conference, 5-7 overall. Hugh Freeze had the comment that he knows that they need to make a bowl game. Hugh, buddy, you need to do better than that. You better. Making a bowl game should be like duh, we're going to make a bowl game. Like that should be a given because this team is significantly better than last year's, in my opinion. Okay, defense has never been the problem for Auburn while Hugh Freeze has been there. Ironically, it's the offense because Peyton Thorne sucks. But you have Jackson Arnold, who I don't think is some special quarterback, but he's better than Peyton Thorne in my opinion. And you have an elite wide receiver room. You're telling me all you're saying is, oh, well, I know we have to make a bowl game, buddy. First of all, week 1 against Baylor, you better not lose. It's a Friday night game. You better not lose to Baylor. You better not. You are a more talented team than Baylor. You better not lose. Because if you lose to Baylor, uh-oh. Because realistically, if you lose to Baylor, you could realistically argue that Auburn starts off the season 2-4 if they lose to Baylor. Because after Baylor, you get your 2 wins, Ball State and South Alabama, right? But then you got to go to Oklahoma and then to Texas A&M. And there's no bye in between that. Like I think Auburn is guaranteed to lose one of those, guaranteed. And then you got Georgia. Okay, and then after that, it gets a little easier. You got a 4 game stretch of Missouri, at Arkansas, Kentucky, at Vanderbilt. I think you need to win all 4 of those, especially if you start off 2-4, because then you'll have rebounded and are now 6-4. And then you can beat Mercer and go 7-4, and then you'll probably lose to Alabama 7-5. 7-5 is 2 games better than you did last year. I think 7-5 gets Hugh Freeze another year, especially since he just got a 5-star quarterback into his quarterback room. But it could go very wrong for Auburn. Like, Auburn could lose to Missouri. They could. That's my issue with Auburn. That's my issue. Who knows how good Vanderbilt's going to be? Who knows? And even Arkansas, Taylon Green I think he's really good. I love Taylon Green at Arkansas, personally, but it's Arkansas. I think Hugh needs to win 7. I think he needs to win at least 7. That's just my opinion. I think the team is too talented to not win 7. Let's see. Oh, yes. How could we not talk about this next guy after what has happened the past 2 seasons? Mike Norvell. So 2 years ago, you had an undefeated regular season and then got absolutely annihilated in the bowl game to Georgia. And then last year happens, and you go 1-7 in conference, 2-10 overall. I think if Florida State doesn't make a bowl this year, I think Mike Norvell is fired. They aren't doing great on the recruiting trail. Transfer portal, they do meh. Like, how can you have faith in Florida State right now? Especially, like, and let's I like to do this. Let's just go down their schedule. Because here's the problem, Florida State. Not only do you have to face what I believe to be the 2 best teams in the ACC, I was about to say Stanford, LOL, Clemson and Miami. Not only do you have to face both of them, you also have to face Alabama, first game of the season, who you are not going to beat, by the way. And you got to face Florida at the end of the season at Florida, who, by the way, you're also not going to beat. So there's 4 losses off the bat before we even talk about anything else. So East Texas A&M you'll beat, and Kent State you'll beat. Okay, I think Florida State should be able to beat Virginia, Wake Forest, and Stanford. Okay, so that's 5 guaranteed wins in my opinion. So you're looking at 4 losses, 5 wins, 5-4. So the real question here is these other 3 games. How do they go? And those other 3 games are home against Pittsburgh, home against Virginia Tech, at NC State. I think Florida State will make a bowl game. I think they'll go about 6-6. I think 6-6 is likely. With a loss to, I think they'll lose to Virginia Tech, and I think they might lose to NC State as well. But I think they could beat Pittsburgh. And 6-6 will probably give Norvell another year because they'll look at it like, oh, well, he went from 2-10 to 6-6. That's a big jump, We'll give him one more year. But I just don't think Mike Norvell is going to be at Florida State much longer. That's just my opinion. Let's see. Oh, I love talking about this guy because I called this back when he was the head coach of Oklahoma. I told everyone who would listen he was overrated then just like he's overrated now, except people are finally starting to realize the fraud of a head coach that this man is, and his name is Lincoln Riley. Let me explain something. I'm going to take let's take a little little path down memory lane. Okay, let me tell you some history. Back when Lincoln was at Oklahoma, and he had Baker and he had Kyler, and they both won the Heisman, and everyone was talking about how great of a coach he was. I was sitting there saying, no, he's not. Lincoln Riley is a good head coach. He's not great. He's not elite. He's incredibly overrated. Why did I keep saying that? Because look, congratulations. You got two of your quarterbacks in back-to-back years in Baker and Kyler to win an individual award in a team sport, the Heisman. Congratulations. But do we want to remember what happened when Baker and Kyler got into the playoffs? Do we want to remember? Baker lost to Georgia in overtime, double overtime, I think, right? Yeah, double overtime. And then Kyler got absolutely annihilated by Joe Burrow's LSU in the playoff. That's what happened. Lincoln Riley, people want to talk about how great this guy is. He's never won a playoff game. He has never won a single playoff game and hasn't even been to the playoff in years. I called this how fraudulent this guy was years ago. I called it years ago. This guy is so mid. He's so mid. Okay? And is USC going to make the playoffs this year? I don't think so. Let's go down the schedule. Missouri State, who is a new FBS team, so you'll beat them. Georgia Southern, you'll beat them. You'll beat Purdue. I think Michigan State is no team to sneeze at, but you should beat them. So congrats, you'll start off 4-0. They'll have USC ranked, and everyone will be like, oh my gosh, USC, they're so back. Here comes Lincoln Riley. And then you know what's going to happen? You're going to lose 4 straight. You're going to win 4 straight, and then you're going to lose 4 straight, because then you have at Illinois, loss. You have Michigan, I think that's a loss. At Notre Dame, definitely a loss. At Nebraska, I think that's a loss too. But then you'll get a reprieve because you'll get 2 wins in a row, right? Oh my gosh, he beat Northwestern. He beat Iowa. Woo! And then you're going to get destroyed by Oregon. Destroyed. And then you'll beat UCLA because they suck. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 7-5. Is 7-5 with this coach who was supposed to come bring USC back to the mountaintop, back to greatness in year, what is this now with him at USC? 4 or 5? Year 4 or 5, whatever, and we're getting 7-5. Is that enough to give Lincoln Riley another year? It shouldn't. I would have fired him after last year. Actually, scratch that. I never would have hired him. I never would have even hired him. But what do I know, right? I'm just a guy. Lincoln Riley sucks. I said it years ago, and I'll continue to say it until people realize it. He sucks, just like Drew Aller. Sorry, I didn't mean to take that shot at Drew Aller. I didn't mean to. But, that's a good segue, actually, to the next coach I actually want to talk about, and James Franklin. James Franklin has Penn State in a position where every year they're good, not great. That's the problem. Or they're great, but they're not elite, however you want to phrase it. And it's going to be the same thing again this year. What you saw last year from Penn State, carbon copy of what you're going to see this year. Okay? You're going to see a team who they'll beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They'll lose in big games to Oregon and Ohio State. And maybe they'll be in the Big Ten championship. If they are, they'll lose that too. They'll make it to the playoff. If they play, if they get lucky like they did last year where they have to face SMU and Boise State, sure, they'll win. They'll make it to the semifinal again and lose to whatever good team is there. If not, if they face a good team earlier than that, they'll lose sooner. That is Penn State. And congrats. You don't lose to teams you're not supposed to lose to. Congrats. But you also don't beat teams that you could beat. And that's exactly how it's going to go this year. Okay? What's Penn State's record? Simple. 10-2. What's the losses? Oregon and Ohio State. It's not that difficult to understand. It's not that difficult to understand. Okay. Could they lose another game? Maybe. They could lose to Indiana. I don't think they will. They could lose to Nebraska. Again, I don't think they will. And they have both those games at home. Do I care that Oregon's coming to Penn State in a whiteout? No. The fans can't play. The whiteout is not going to make Drew Aller not suck. Just being honest. And if you get a carbon copy of what you got last year, let's say Penn State makes the playoffs, they get like a 6-7 seed, and let's say they win the first game, lose in the second round of the playoffs. Does James Franklin get another year? Does he? When everyone thinks that this team is one of the most talented teams in college football, even though I don't think that because their quarterback sucks. I mean, I'm just curious to know how long Penn State is willing to be middle of the road. That's what I want to know. But we'll move on before I rant anymore about Drew Aller and Penn State and how overrated they are. Brett Venables, head coach of Oklahoma. I think this one is pretty kind of self-explanatory. I think everyone probably has him on the hot seat. This is a year where you have the best quarterback you've had since you've been there in John Mateer. You have an elite running back in Jaden Ott. Your defense should be good because you're a defensive coach. Oklahoma needs to do really well this season for Brett Venables to get another year. I mean, 2-6 last year, 6-7 overall. I think you need to win at least. Honestly, I think Oklahoma needs to win at least 8 games. I think 8-4, at minimum, has to happen. Okay, and what's the most important game on their schedule? Easy, Michigan, week 2. Week 2 against Michigan. You get them at home. You better win. You are more talented than Michigan. You're going to be facing a freshman quarterback in his first hard test. You better win. You better. Okay? And it opens up so much for you if you win that Michigan game. 8-4, 9-3 really becomes a possibility. Because you start off Illinois State, win. Let's say you beat Michigan, you beat Temple, you're 3-0, you're feeling good. You could beat Auburn. You're good enough to beat Auburn. And it's at Oklahoma, and then you get Kent State. 5-0 is so possible. It's so possible for Oklahoma. Okay? Now, of course, after you are 5-0, it gets very difficult. Okay? It gets very difficult because obviously you have the Red River rivalry against Texas, which I think you'll lose because Texas is a better team. At South Carolina is no joke. You could lose that. You get Ole Miss at home. I think you could potentially win that. You got to go to Tennessee, which is never fun. To Alabama, that won't be fun, and they'll be looking for revenge. And then you get Missouri at home. That's why I say starting off 5-0 is so important. Because then all you got to do is win 3 of them. You just got to go. Oh, by the way, LSU is your last game of the season, which you won't win that. But because let's just assume you lose to Texas, Alabama, and LSU, right? You just got to win 3 of the other 4. Tennessee, I think you're better than Tennessee. I think you're better than Missouri. Okay, then you just got to win 1 between Ole Miss and South Carolina, which is possible. I think Brett Venables and this Oklahoma team has to go 8-4 in order for him to get another year. This is probably one not a lot of people would expect to be on a hot seat list, but I just personally believe this to be the case, and that's Mark Stoops at Kentucky. A lot of people feel like he'll never be fired because he always has Kentucky at least somewhat relevant for half the season. He really didn't last year. Last year, Kentucky was 1-7 in conference, 4-8 overall. And how can you expect much better this year? How can you? With the loss of Maxwell Hairston, with the loss of Deone Walker, I mean, how can you expect much better out of Kentucky this year, realistically? Okay? They'll beat Toledo week 1, and they'll beat Eastern Michigan week 3, and they'll beat Tennessee Tech towards the end of the season. Congrats. But look at all the other players. all the other teams on their schedule. Ole Miss, loss. South Carolina, loss. Georgia, loss. Texas, loss. Florida, loss. And Louisville, loss. That's 6 guaranteed losses, in my opinion. Not to mention, you could lose to Auburn, you could lose to Vanderbilt, and you could lose to Tennessee. Like, I'm just putting this out here. Kentucky could easily go 0-8 in conference. Easily. And their only 3 wins are Toledo, Eastern Michigan, and Tennessee Tech. That could easily happen, I'm telling you now. And if that happens, I'd fire Mark Stoops. Because clearly what you're doing isn't good enough anymore. All right, we got one more. And this one is probably a hot take out of me. Although I said this guy's name last year, and I still stand by it because of what happened last year and what I think is going to happen this year with this football team. It's Mario Cristobal out of Miami. Why do I say Mario Cristobal out of Miami? I said him last year as far as the hot seat in the preseason because I had Miami as my most disappointing team because everyone thought they would be a lock in to win the ACC and be a top 4 seed, and they didn't even make the playoffs. They didn't even make the ACC championship game, like I predicted, by the way. Because what is Mario and Miami known for? Disappointment. Disappointment. And it's going to be the same thing this year. Do you want to know why? Because first of all, you have a worse quarterback named Carson Beck, who we don't even know how good he's going to be coming off of injury. Plus, you lost a ton to the draft, a ton of really good talent like Xavier Restrepo, just as an example, and Damian Martinez, and obviously Cam Ward. Like, you face Notre Dame week 1. You're going to lose that. You're losing to Notre Dame week 1, period. And then you have Bethune-Cookman, who you'll beat. USF is no slouch, but you'll beat USF. This Florida team is not the Florida team you faced last year. And Florida gave Carson Beck some fits last year when he was at Georgia. I think Florida could definitely beat Miami this go-around. Florida State's going to be better, but you should still beat them. Louisville, I think, is very underrated. I have them in the ACC championship game, and I think you'll lose to them. You'll beat Stanford. SMU made the playoffs last year. How can I be confident that you'll beat them, especially with it being at SMU? Syracuse gave you fits last year and beat you last year, and I predicted they would beat you last year, preseason and when the pick came. And I think it could happen again because Fran Brown is no joke. You'll beat NC State. Virginia Tech could give you some trouble, but I think you could beat them, and then you'll beat Pitt to end the season. Why Pitt is your end of season matchup is beyond me, but whatever. So what would that leave you? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 losses, potentially 5. 8-4 once again doesn't get you in the playoff. 7-5 certainly doesn't. And how do you just keep running this back with Mario? How? He's not going to get you to the mountaintop. He's not. Like, I understand. You just got Jackson Cantwell, the number 1 overall player in high school, an offensive tackle. Cool. But the fact of them, and Mario's pretty good at recruiting and transfer portal and all that. But the reality remains that he is disappointing every year. Just like Miami. And you're not going to reach the mountaintop with him. You're not. You can't, are you just going to keep running it back? And then maybe one time it'll magically happen. Because it won't. Your best shot was last year, and you couldn't even make the conference championship game in the ACC, which is a terrible conference. Like, what are we talking about? I think Mario Cristobal should be on the hot seat, even though he probably isn't. Just saying. But that's my hot seat stuff. I figured that would be an interesting one to do this week. I don't know what I'm going to do next week. It's kind of just going on the fly kind of stuff because it's just this is the time in the off season where it's kind of just hard. You know, you just want football to be here, man. You want football to be here. I will be doing my playoff predictions soon. Maybe that's next week. Maybe I'll give it a few weeks. Maybe I'll wait until July. But playoff predictions will be coming sometime soon. That could be next week. We'll see. I hope everyone has a tremendous Friday. And don't remember to go out there or sorry, did I say don't remember? Goodness gracious. Don't forget to go out there and be great.